Hello, everyone. Welcome to TCAF 2021. My name is Faduma. I'm part of the programming team at TCAF. You are all in for a treat as we dive into our awesome kids mystery book panel, Whodunnit? It's elementary. Before we begin, the Toronto Comic Arts Festival would like to honor and acknowledge the original caretakers of this land, the Anishinaabe, Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, Haudenosaunee, and the Huron-Wendat peoples. We are in a territory that was the subject of the Dish with One Spoon, One Pump Belt Covenant, an agreement between the Anishinaabe, Mississaugas, Haudenosaunee, and allied nations to share and care for the land. We also acknowledge that this area is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. TCAF makes this acknowledgement as a reminder that we are all treaty people and that we have a responsibility to the land and each other. This acknowledgement is a touchstone in our process of thinking through what it means to live and work on colonized land, and is an expression of solidarity with our Indigenous siblings. TCAF commits to strengthening its relationship with Indigenous communities in Toronto and increasing Indigenous voices and perspectives in our programming. Thank you everyone for coming. Just a note, if you want to turn on closed captioning, you can turn it on at the bottom right corner of your screen where it says live transcript. And welcome everyone to Whodunnit? It's elementary. It's a tough case to crack. What makes a great mystery book for kids? We've got the clues, and in this debrief, we'll explore the works of Searra Miller, Mason Moony, Doppleganger Detective, Tom Angleberger, Slime for Dinner, and Cale Atkinson, Simon & Chester, Super Detectives, and discuss their experiences creating mystery stories for young readers. Join us as we unravel our guest artists' favorite mystery books and their inspirations. We are joined by the awesome Joey Matthews, who will be moderating this panel. Joey, take it away.
Hi, everybody. Like Faduma said, my name is Joey. Some quick background on me. I'm also a comic artist and have worked in this genre before, doing a puppet web series about Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson, as well as making like some supernatural horror comics in the past. So yeah, welcome everybody. I guess we can just kick it off first with why the mystery genre? What has brought you to this spot in your career to do these types of stories?
Well, I'll be glad to start because I started with a mystery. I've done all kinds of books now, but my very first book that I finished and wrote was a mystery. And I think it's because I loved them so much when I was a kid. I just gobbled them up, and especially the good ones. And I wanted to try to write a good one. And I found out it was really hard sometimes to do that, but that was my goal.
Yeah, same. I think, just as a kid, like even watching like X-Files episodes and stuff, it was just, I was always drawn to it. Like, yeah.
Yeah, I'm pretty much the same. For me, it was just another area that I've taken in so many avenues of it. I just love all the tropes of the detective stories and the mystery stories. And so for this book, which was my first graphic novel, I'm used to doing more picture books where I don't have as much story real estate. And so to now have more room to actually be able to dive into all these tropes and kind of cram as many of them as I could into a book was really fun. And that was my big task or challenge to myself.
That's great. I heard X-Files in there. What other kinds of like inspirations kind of do you put into your work? Like,
I'm just laughing about the X-Files because that didn't exactly exist when I was a kid. I'm so old that we were watching, the Hardy Boys with those two really cool dudes from the 70s. Remember those cool dudes with the feathered hair? That was our idea of what a detective was. They had this feathered hair, and they looked good while they were solving crimes.
One of oh, go ahead, Sienna.
Oh, I was just going to say, like, unsolved mysteries and stuff too. Like, that was, especially like the really old ones, with Robert Stack and stuff. I was so obsessed with those as a kid. And what I loved, I think, was that it was all kinds of mysteries. And yeah, that was definitely another inspiration for me growing up.
One of the ones that I really love going back to, which is certainly before my time, was all the old Alfred Hitchcock Presents shorts. I loved all those kind of mysteries.
Yeah.
And same with Twilight Zone, like all the old ones. But I love just because they're so varied and they're so interesting and such fun, like single mysteries. And those definitely were really inspiring. Because otherwise, for me, I can't really pinpoint a lot of it because some of them became such kind of stereotypical detective-y things that they live in my head that I don't know where they originally came from. Was it like some parody from a cartoon based on like a Sherlock or an Agatha Christie or something like that? Yeah, I'm not sure.
Yeah, there's definitely like lots of the mystery genre, especially now, is so filled with parody that it's kind of like you hear a story in like, say, even like a Looney Tunes or even Scooby-Doo, and then you find the original source material is like hundreds of years old.
Totally, or like Simpsons and all those types of things. Like so many like homages to an homage to an homage. So you're like, I don't know where this came from, and I've seen it so many times now. It just exists.
Yeah, Treehouse of Horror definitely is like my horror 101 treatment as a kid. That's what like got me into the genre.
Totally.
Tom, it's funny that you mentioned like childhood. And it kind of shows like a bit of our age gap here. Was I remember when Geronimo Stilton was new in like my childhood, and
Right.
And now you're adapting it to this graphic novel. How did you find working with somebody else's creation?
I'm really loving it because you don't have to do the hard work. The Geronimo is so much fun. He's just, the stories, there's so much material in there. And since we're translating them from Italian into English, there's a lot of room for me to wiggle around and, you know, mess with things and just play basically in this crazy mouse. It's all mice and rats and the occasional cat. This crazy world that they built. All the world building has been done, and I just get to play in it. It's a ball. It's really great. And the reason that I'm doing it is because I was like a big fan of Geronimo as an adult, a big fan of Geronimo. And so I contacted Scholastic and asked them if I could write a Geronimo. And they said, no, but you could draw one. So I learned how to draw, or tried to.
So you originally went
drawing.
So you originally went in as a writer, and then did you have much art experience pre doing this?
Actually, I've wanted to be a comic book artist forever. That was my original dream. And then I became a writer, and I had like the Origami Yoda book and everything. And then when I got the opportunity to finally make my dream of being a comic book artist come true, and to get to do a character that I really liked, it was just like a miracle. It was just too good to be true, or too good to pass up, definitely.
For sure. And I want to kind of take that into a more direct question for Searra and Cale of like, what was the process of getting your own creation out into the world?
Want to go first, Searra? Yeah, sure.
Yeah, you go first.
Oh, you want me to go first?
Oh, yeah, sorry.
We're just both, yeah. For myself, it was definitely like a great experience because this graphic novel, the one that I'm talking about today, the Super Detectives, it's a kind of a sequel to a picture book that I wrote and illustrated behind me there, Sir Simon Super Scare, that kind of set up the characters of this ghost and his best friend Chester. It's kind of about a ghost who's kind of this lazy ghost. He doesn't like doing your typical ghost things like flicking lights all day or all night and like squeaking the stairs or slamming doors. And so he kind of tricks Chester into doing all his ghost kind of chores. And then eventually it kind of realizes how similar they are, and they become really good friends. And so after we did the picture book, me and my editor were talking about how fun it'd be to do like a bigger series with these characters and like actually kind of dig in a bit more than what you could do in a single picture book. And the detective thing is kind of what got thrown around because it's such a fun area. Like you can do so much. And because they're kind of silly characters that just get big over the top ideas, it was like kind of thinking like, well, Simon the Ghost is just going to have this grandiose image of what it is to be a detective. And even if it's the smallest mystery, he's going to build it up to be this huge thing. Like there's got to be secret doors, and there's got to be some artifact you find or some letter that has no return address and that leads you on some wild adventure. So a lot of it just kind of flowed really easy for whatever reason. I think, again, because of all these, as a kid, you watch so many homages and so many things to detectives that you have all these ideas, or adventure movies like Goonies to whatever, that you just like, oh yeah, I could just keep digging into all this stuff. So a lot of it came really naturally. And for myself, it was really fun because I love writing those characters, and I got to kind of just bring out their voices more and have that fun banter and personality between them as they kind of argue over what this mystery is, or which way to go. So it was pretty fun. Like, it definitely has those challenges where you are starting from scratch in a world, like unlike with Tom, where you're kind of going off something that has this whole already so much to look at to see like, well, what is it already built up from, where this is like new. But I think I was just kind of trying to start in a small bubble and not think too big about this world or about too much happening outside of what they're experiencing. And then as these books go, I'm going to try to slowly build it up. But I think it's easy to get overwhelmed if it's too much. Like, oh my God, well, what's this town like? Who's in this town? What's this like? And all that. I was trying to keep it kind of simple.
Yeah, for me, Mason Moony kind of started actually as my like college thesis, and I just had this idea of like a boy with like a heart in a jar, and kind of then just like building a story around that character. Like that's really where it started for me, and thinking about like how insecure he was. And at the time I was watching a lot of Ghost Adventures with Zach Bagans, which is a terrible show, but I just kind of loved that like world of like, you know, these like cheesy people trying to act tough as they explore haunted houses, you know. So I wanted to like create a world where he's like kind of competing against like this really like dreamy, you know, ghost hunter guy that's super famous, and just kind of like exploring like, you know, jealousy and some of those like emotions, I guess, that kids might like feel in the world, you know, and stuff. And yeah, and then like try to put in those mystery tropes. And this is like the first book in a series, and yeah, trying to start small and then but put in enough stuff that later, you know, you can expand it. And yeah, we'll see where it goes. I don't know.
But that's like the gift and the curse of starting a series, is you want to make sure there's enough to get everybody interested, but you also want to make sure you have some breadcrumbs to like lead them into the next book. So I definitely think you did that after having read your graphic novel. Did you know when you wanted to do the character with the jar in the heart, where the heart came from? Like, maybe without spoiling it for anybody who hasn't read it yet, but did you know that before you even created the story?
No.
No?
No. It started, it was just like an assignment in an illustration class to like just create an original character. And I just was kind of thinking of my brother, who was a little kid at the time, and just thinking how like frustrated he was all the time and stuff. And thinking about how do you like show him maybe taking away like his emotion. I don't know if that makes sense,
right?
But, you know, and like taking out kind of his heart and stuff, and what does that look like? And yeah, so it definitely evolved from that very early starting point. Yeah, I know Brad was like, we really like this character, like what can you do with it? So then it was trying to just build around that.
That's awesome. And kind of speaking to that, and all three of you can kind of answer this, of like, how many small details did you feel were really important for you to add to the book, whether your audience was going to notice them or not? Because I feel like you all kind of have this, like, there's a lot of stuff going on in your art, but not everything is necessarily mentioned. So kind of talk about your little Easter eggs maybe in your stories.
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in first. I really love trying to sneak things in my art when I can. And when I did the picture book of Sir Simon before this graphic novel, that's where I first, it felt like it was the only time I'll ever be able to sneak references to my favorite classic movies and scary movies in a picture book, where generally you wouldn't think you'd have little references to The Exorcist or, you know, The Shining in a picture book. And I just love kind of sneaking them in there, where, you know, only if you've seen it. It's never, I didn't want it to distract from the story at any point. And then when I did this graphic novel, I wanted to be able to keep doing that if I could. And I found it a lot harder with a graphic novel because you're dealing in panels. And if you're throwing a whole bunch of stuff in the background of a panel where you just have two characters, it's kind of hard for your eye not to go to this random, very specific detail.
Right.
So I was trying my best. I think I have about 40 to 45 different little Easter eggs in the book. That some I will never reveal because I love the idea of somebody being able to find them, but they go from being big to pretty small. Like here's Simon looking for detective outfit stuff as the ghost, but from a little Rocky Horror Picture Show vest there to I think the board game Clue to the dress that is beside him in the box is a reference, and little book covers. I love trying to sneak in as much little bits and bobs as I can in them.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, I have an Easter egg I'd love to show you. My book, if you look at like the style of artwork here, I think you can see that Dogman is like a big influence on me. And just Dogman opened the door for someone like me to be able to draw a graphic novel because, you know, I'm not that great of an artist. And Dave Pilkey sort of showed us you don't have to have a million details in there. So anyway, I had this, I wanted to put in an Easter egg for Dave. So since in Geronimo's world, everything is mice. So whatever you want to make an Easter egg of, you just change it to mice. Like if it was aliens, you'd say, in space, no one can hear you squeak. You know, stuff like that. So this is my little Easter egg. They're packing to go tracking down the mystery, and he wants to bring along his bedtime story, which is Dog Mouse.
Great.
And
Awesome.
so
Fantastic.
I love Dave. Dave is amazing. Those books are incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think for me, most of my Easter eggs will maybe show up in the next book. It was about, as I was doing the art, like just trying to give myself as many avenues for future books as I could, like through like posters and flyers and stuff in the background. Like, you know, I think there's like a school dance poster on the fridge, you know, and stuff, and just like leaving doors open for myself so that people might think that I was being smart and had everything planned, and like, you know, really, I don't know what's happening next, but you know, yeah.
That's the greatest feeling in the world, is when you've planted something and then like near the end of the book you suddenly realize, oh my gosh, that fits now. I bring that back. Everything, that's the best feel. That's why I love this job. Puzzles together and you don't always know what the finished puzzle looks like, and you find that piece that it fits in, and you just like, it's a happy day.
It's cool that you brought up Dave Pilkey, because the Captain Underpants books and like the hand-drawn comics inside them were easily the earliest inspiration for me to ever draw comics. Like my first comic was a Captain Underpants book where I turned my principal into Captain Underpants. So with did you three start young? And if so, what or even if you didn't, like, do you have advice for younger kids who want to make their own comics, like the best places to start?
Yeah, I'll go first. Yeah, my first comics were based on the Itchy and Scratchy cartoon from The Simpsons. It was my dad and my cat who like would just pee all over everything. So it was just him constantly being foiled by like my cat peeing on stuff. But yeah, so I was like doing that when I was really young, but I was also obsessed with Archie comics and did a lot of that stuff. So it was definitely like a gradual, you know, like comics were always there in some way. It was just a way to explore whatever I was interested in. And I think that's really, you know, for me, like it wasn't about comics. It was just, this is a medium to, you know, express like this movie that I'm really into, or, you know, and I think, yeah, just don't worry about if your art is good, just make weird stuff.
Yes, make weird stuff. That's the best.
Yeah, for myself as well, it started quite young. I always loved comics, and I love comic strips a lot too, from like Garfield to then Into the Far Side and things like that. And at a really young age, I always just wanted to try to make my own. So I remember I made, I was a really big fan of Sergio Aragona's work for Mad Magazine, and he did a comic called Gru the Wanderer. And that comic kind of opened up my whole world, because before that, all I knew was Spider-Man or Batman or superhero comics. which I loved, but it didn't really translate to me as anything I could ever do because the art was so good and it's on this other level. And it wasn't really humor, where then Gru was suddenly, oh, you could do comics that are funny and you can have like cartoony more art. And that really kind of opened up my eyes. And in elementary school, I tried to make my own comic, which was essentially a ripoff of Gru the Wanderer called The Black Knight, with the character's name was John Smith, which I thought was an original name at the time. And I sold them in my school to friends and classmates. Had one returned because it was too violent for the parents. One too many goblin heads chopped off. And so I was always really into just trying all the different things from comics. Then a little bit later, I was trying to do my own comic strips. And I found a book that was called I think it was the Graphic Artists Marketplace or Market Book. And it gave you all the lists of newspapers and magazines where you could send comic strips and how much they would pay you if they bought one. And so I just started mailing all my comic strips out to all these different magazines. And I have a big binder still of rejection letters from like the National Enquirer and Cat Fancy magazine and all these places. But I was just so excited as a kid to get my stuff out there and to know that someone actually might see it, that even just getting a rejection letter was so cool. So I was like, oh my gosh, people actually saw this at the National Enquirer or wherever it was. And so I think the part that really helped me, and I definitely, I don't know, I guess as a tip recommend is just like sharing and getting your stuff out there. For me now, it made me not as afraid of getting rejection or that fear of failure that I think so many artists kind of have that can be so debilitating, where there's all these people that can be amazing artists, but then that fear really kind of can hold you back. And for me, starting at that early age and just kept sharing and getting my stuff out there, I think it helped me kind of get over that at a young age. So then I was okay with, getting feedback or getting criticism that can be hard sometimes, but can also be so helpful.
For sure. Get your stuff out there, share it.
Is it my turn?
Yeah. Do you have any words of advice?
Yeah, I do have. I have like this number one, a very practical piece of information. It's in my book R2D2, and it is. I just feel like this is one thing that every young cartoonist can do to improve their work. Oh, I should have had a bookmark on it. Okay, well, I can't find it. But it is this rule, and Yoda says it, so it's backwards. But basically, it's draw the text and then draw the speech balloon around it. Do not draw a speech balloon and then try to cram the text in there. It's going to be a disaster. You're going to end up writing really tiny down at the bottom, or you're going to have like all this empty, weird space up there in the text balloon. And, if you look at Winsor McCay, the pioneer, the great master, if somebody had just told him that rule, his comics would be so much more readable. That's my one and only, that's the only rule I've got. Other than that, you can do anything you want to. It's your page. You have total freedom. But man, do not go cramming your words in there.
Yeah, speaking of kind of do whatever you want with Searra, I found that your work was really interesting because it kind of mixed the concept of a prose story, illustrations, and then comics kind of interspersed. Why was that a creative decision that you made? Because it's obviously very intentional with your narrator and then the comic pages. So how did that idea come up for you to do something a little bit not conventional?
It's definitely kind of a long process to get there, and a lot of conversations with my editor and stuff. Originally, it was just going to be straight comics and stuff. But we talked about aging it down and stuff and kind of making it like a transition from picture books maybe to like more graphic novel, and how do you do that? And I was kind of nervous about it at first, and like, how do you balance it? But I love illustration so much, like that's what I majored in. And so it was really fun to kind of get a play off of those things and really make like some really detailed illustrations that I think helped build out the world.
Yeah, there's definitely also like a graphic design element to it too, because now you're not just saying like, oh, these panels have to be sequentially understood, but now you have the text and just the extra pictures to kind of fill out the page and all that kind of stuff. Like where do the three of you see yourself like are you 100% an illustrator? Do you feel like you're a graphic designer in terms of how you plan your pages, or are you just a storyteller? How do you see yourself in that kind of world?
Yeah, for me, I definitely feel like an illustrator, even though I seem to be doing more comics than anything. So maybe eventually I'll feel like a cartoonist, but yeah, definitely not a graphic designer though. That's a struggle.
Tom, what do you think?
You're asking me?
Mhm.
I was waiting to hear what you had to say.
I got to hear what you have to say first.
And then you're just going to say same.
Mhm, mhm.
Yeah, I'm glad you said storyteller, because that's all I am. My artwork, I mean, for me to go around showing people this artwork and saying I'm an artist, that's embarrassing, because my artwork is just not up there with, your Raina Telgemeier, who I think is the absolute master of drawing kids and all of that, and Dan Santat, who I've gotten to work with, and my wife, Cece Bell, that did El Defo. Those people were so much better artists than I am. It's ridiculous for me to put myself in that category. So I'm using these drawings to try to get a story across. And I'm not there to dazzle anybody with artwork. I'm just there to get that story through and help the kid move through this story. I'm definitely not going to go around calling myself an artist or an illustrator or a graphic designer.
I think that's really important for even like younger artists starting out, though, is that like effective storytelling doesn't mean you're like a technically great artist, right? Like you can tell a great story with unconventional art, but as long as it makes sense, that's an effective comic book. I think people get too hung up on like, gotta be the best at drawing anatomy or else I'll never be a good artist.
And I think as well, like the thing is, if you have a book that's beautiful, but like a terrible story, I don't think it's going to work at all. And if you have a book that's terrible art, but a great story, it can still work. And I think like that's an important thing as well to always remember, where it's like, and I have like professionally, I would always have called myself more of an artist than a writer. And just because I feel so much more confident in drawing than writing stories, and writing I find is just a lot harder. And I always just feel in this kind of nebulous of unknown, like, I don't know if this is good. Does this sentence work? Does this explain anything? And getting lost in it, where with art, I always found at least I could kind of see it. Like, okay, I think I can tell that looks like a bear. Okay, that's fine. But yeah, so, and then I feel with sometimes with storytelling, I could get wrapped up in art and be like, oh, I got to make this background so beautiful, and I got to paint this sky so realistic. And that has no purpose. Like, it's a sky, and now it took away from the whole page, and I spent days painting this stupid cloud or something. And so I think sometimes it's important to kind of rein in, even if you can draw really good, it's you have to complement the story and what works for the story. And that can be kind of an important, I don't know, element. But yeah, I don't, as far as referring to myself, I'm not too sure. Like with Tom, I kind of agree with the storytelling, because like I like that a lot more. I still think of myself a bit more as an artist, even though I've written a number of books. But I like the storytelling kind of name, because you are just trying to get this thing across, whether it's more art heavy or whether it's more kind of story heavy. It's still just trying to hopefully get that story to people. Hopefully.
In your writing process, do you find you, and this is for all three of you can answer, do you find you write first and draw after? Or do you find there's always kind of like a back and forth where you do like a little bit of drawing here, a little bit of writing here, redraw a page or draw something different, and then kind of go back to writing? Or is it very much a like step-by-step process? Or do you kind of always go back and forth?
I do a little bit of both. And I think like depending if I'm in a flow with writing, maybe like if like with the Simon Chester, there's a lot of banter, so maybe that will be a lot more just kind of in the writing back and forth. But definitely in trying to figure out with like the panels and just kind of, I think for the graphic novel, I found it really interesting and tricky trying to figure out that real estate of like, well, how is this like this page of text or conversation actually break down into like, well, how many panels is it going to take? And then like, oh my gosh, this takes 20 pages. I think I got to cut back this banter, or just trying to figure that out. So I think for me, I needed to do the back and forth just to even see like how that will fit or kind of not fit for space.
Yeah, I have to start with a script first. Like my brain can't do both at one time. It's like, and then once I have the script, I can kind of start breaking it down into pages. But yeah, I can't do
The drawing
Yeah.
right at the same time.
Yeah, I agree. I kind of like to get my panels down and type up my speech balloons, or type up what's going to go in the speech balloons. And I like to do that before I really get going with the drawing. Sometimes I'll make a little note, like, oh, I need to, here's something funny I could do, and I go ahead and draw it. But most of the time, I really like to get that text down because, for one thing, if you're going to have a whole bunch of text in a panel, you're not going to have room for a certain drawing, and vice versa. So I like to know what I got to work with.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That like you wanna know. Like that's cool.
I've become very practical. I have to tell you.
Yeah.
I'm on like page 700 of Geronimo's, and I'm really practical now. Any kind of like artsy stuff, I've had to leave that behind because it's just like, man, we got to figure out how Geronimo is going to water ski down a sewer. We've got to get that figured out today. There's no time for anything, any funny business. I've got to get this done. And so yeah, with deadlines and everything, I've become, and I never would have thought that I was a practical person, but yeah, a lot of my stuff is just about, we've got to get this image down and make sure that it reads.
Yeah, definitely like finding the process that works for you to get your deadlines is the most important. Like, and I think a lot of young artists will see one person's work ethic and go like, oh, I have to copy that, instead of trying to find their own thing. And if they can't live up to that, they feel like they're not working right. But as long as you can clump your processes together in a way that gets you to where you want to go, I think that's like the most important part for a young comic artist to do that, for sure. Do you find that there's like a part of your process you wish you had more control over? Like, maybe not control the right word, but that you wish you had a bit better handle on? Where's your weak spots?
Well, my weak spot is coloring. That's why we hire this fantastic colorist, Corey Barba, because I have zero ideas for coloring. I can't figure it out. I can only ever find like 3 colors. I cannot do that at all. That is my absolute Achilles heel.
And for any younger kids listening who might not know, colorists actually, like, sometimes in comics, colorists are another person who comes in and colors the comic for the illustrator. So if you're really good at coloring books, but maybe aren't a great artist, that's a career path that you can take, which is very helpful, because I, like Tom, I'm not very great at coloring my own work, and I usually get somebody else to do it too. So it's definitely a career path to do that coloring. Cale and Searra, do you have kind of weak spots that maybe you wish you were more refined at?
Yeah, I definitely do. I think for me, a lot of it is the writing process. I find most of the challenging. I think, like, definitely art can be as well, but in the writing, just getting that solid base down, for me, I think that's the toughest part. And just like having an idea for story, but like figuring out that actual text that's going to go on the pages and everything else it's probably my slowest point, where I wish that would just appear in front of me and then I could start drawing. Yeah, I'm not too sure. But what about you, Searra?
Yeah, definitely for me, the writing too. Like that is such a hard part of it. It's just like, oh God, just let this be over already. Like, I just want to listen to podcasts and draw stuff. Like, yeah, it's definitely, and then just like editing myself too. Like, I just have like so much dialogue that I want everyone to say. And I'm just like, it's all important, when really, I think I could probably try to cut back on some of that stuff. But yeah, writing is so hard.
So I think we're going to start kind of transitioning into the Q&A side. So anybody who's listening, we do have a Q&A kind of option at the bottom there. So if you have any questions for the panelists, please put them in there and I can read them off. But let's start with How do you keep the mystery genre fresh? What's something that you do to kind of make sure you're not just treading over the same ground all the time?
I think for me, it's about making compelling characters that, I think you can do any trope a million times as long as you really care about a character and the journey that they're on. Yeah.
I kind of agree with that too. I think you are reading it because there's the mystery aspect, but then also you're getting attached to the characters and just wanting to follow them and see how they react with certain things. Like for mine, a lot of it was trying to just throw the characters in those, or have the characters wishing it was those tropes and following them through that, and then having the fun of also making it very anticlimactic too in mine, where it's all this big build up for the most kind of boring end result, but that's what kind of kept it fun for this one, was trying to kind of go that route.
I guess I just try to keep it fresh by having my characters scream a lot. Like as the book goes on, the eyes get wider and wider and the mouths get bigger and bigger. I guess that's about all I got. But luckily the source material that I'm working with is so packed with crazy ideas that I sort of get a free pass on that one. I've got a bottomless well of great stuff in the Geronimo universe.
I want a book of Tom's practical facts or practical things to do, and it'll be through the speech bubbles, and it's make the eyes and mouth bigger as the book says. If you follow these rules, you will have a successful book. Because I'm writing these things down.
Tom's Guide to Making Comics would be on my shelf next to Understanding Comics and some Linda Berry syllabus books and all that.
Oh, you got the Linda Berry? Book
immediately accessible on my desk. Yeah, she's great.
Here's an example. At some point, the mouth just gets so big, you just slip the words right in.
Yeah, just make the mouth itself the speech balloon.
Yeah, but I'm glad you brought up that Linda Berry Understanding Comics, which of course has the same title as Scott McCloud's Understanding Comics. Those are the two Bibles. They are very completely different books, and yet they are the two most valuable books that a comic book artist could possibly have, I think.
They're very fantastic, and I have them immediately accessible on my desk just to make sure that I'm always reminded what's the right thing to do. Next question. This one is directed specifically to Searra. Mason Moony has a very 1980s vibe. Did you plan that? And then a second question, will Trent Riley be in the next Mason Moony book?
Yes, Trent Riley plays a very big part in the next Mason book. I love him too much for him to not be in every book as a big character. I love, like I said, unsolved mysteries and just kind of that whole aesthetic of in Lost Boys and just kind of that over the top look. So I wanted it to kind of feel like it could take place at any time, but I think just my own love of that aesthetic definitely bled through.
I remember specifically seeing the VHS tapes in the background, and to me, there's something about analog technology that always feels a little more haunted than digital technology. So VHS tapes in spooky things always make more sense to me than DVDs. Okay. Do you feel like there's any part of the writing and drawing process that is different for making comics for kids versus making it for adults, especially in the mystery genre? Is that thinker?
It is.
Yeah, I'm not too sure. I've never written for adults, so I'm not too sure if I would do anything different. I don't think I would, but maybe.
I think that's kind of a great answer, because I think the best kids books don't talk down to them. It's just, I would do the same thing for a kid's story as I would for an adult story in terms of how I would tell it. So
Yeah, and I think with like a comic, you're still just having to make sure that the eyes are following the right way, or everything's kind of leading you as you want it. So I suppose you could try to get more subtle, but I don't know if you would want to, because you still want it to be a very clear story to read. So yeah, I'm not too sure.
I think that's a good answer. Yeah.
Tom, same thoughts?
Yeah, I also think that was a good answer. And I just can't even imagine writing for adults. They're boring.
Just the worst.
Yeah. Adults aren't great. If you gave your book to your former self when you were a kid, like when you were the age bracket for your book, what do you think they would think about it?
They would love it and buy 10 copies. I think I would like it because I love cartoony kind of things as a kid that were kind of silly and fun. And I think that's what I really enjoyed about doing this book, was I got to kind of dive into a lot of those parts that I really loved as a kid, and the kind of humor that I really enjoyed. So I hope it would speak to my childhood self.
Yeah, I feel like I'm always trying to make books for my childhood self. Like, I really don't know any other kids, like, so, it's like, what would I have loved as a kid? So hopefully, yeah.
Man, I wish we had all these graphic novels when I was a kid. I mean, I was a Marvel reader and I read my Marvels, but I like you were saying, when you finally found Gru, and Gru wasn't a superhero story and you loved it, Gru was actually one of probably the first non-superhero books I read too. And I just wish we had all these options like mysteries when I was a kid, because I loved mysteries and I loved comics. They weren't put together. There was no option for me. So I wish we had all of these books, especially your guys' books. They both sound like stuff that 10-year-old me would have devoured.
Yeah, I definitely think like the genre pool is getting like a lot bigger for comics for kids. Like we've kind of been seeing that for adults with like more mature graphic novels, but now we're really seeing that for kids, is like comics are not a genre, they're a medium, and we're getting all the different genres now. And that's kind of great. I do. And yeah, I definitely sympathize with making art for your younger self. Like if 5 to 12-year-old me didn't like the things I make now, I don't think it's worth making. The next question is, do you get inspired by true crime stories?
No. I got into the habit of listening to lots of true crime podcasts the past year or two, but I don't know how much they inspired my work. It'd get a little scary probably if they inspired it too much, but yeah, maybe there's the odd thing. I don't know.
Yeah, I was going to say, I feel like, when you're drawing like 10 hours a day and stuff, eventually you have to just turn to true crime, because what else is there in the podcast world, But yeah, I don't know that they really, I'm usually just horrified.
Yeah.
Actually, this is a true story right here. This
the slime, yeah.
Crime. Yeah. It's very shocking.
So we have a question here. So at school, I'm making a Mr. and Mrs. book. I loved reading those from the library when I was a kid. And I don't know what to write. Can you give me an idea?
Yeah, here's my thing. For whenever you need an idea, just think right at this moment, what does that character wish would happen, or what do they wish would not happen? And depending on how you're feeling, you can give them what they want, or you can give them what they don't want. And that's always a way to, whenever you get stuck, just find out what they're wishing for.
I remember hearing a thing as well, where if you took a character and you're like, well, what's the absolute worst thing that could happen to them in their mind, and then make that happen to them, and then kind of see where that would go.
Yeah, I think, just ask your character questions. I think that's a great advice.
Cool. I find this is a really interesting question. How do you handle doing mysteries for kids? We've kind of talked about that, especially knowing that the kid themselves is the one trying to solve the mystery. And the question asker said it. I'm a frustrated Encyclopedia Brown reader.
Same here, man. Encyclopedia Brown. What a ripoff. Have you ever gone back to read those? They're outrageous. They really make me upset. They're so unfair. They're so unfair. Give me a little more information, man. Yeah, if you're writing a mystery and when they get to the solution, they had absolutely no clue that it was coming at all. I don't know. I mean, Agatha Christie made a career out of that, but I think a kid enjoys solving it on their own, and I want them to figure it out like one page before my detective does.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Cale and Searra, you're just kind of nodding in agreement there.
Yeah. I think Tom nailed it there.
Yeah, because like I definitely remember reading certain Batman books and getting very frustrated because the reveal would just be like Batman just suddenly knew the answer, and I'm like, but you were confused this whole time, and now that it's the end of the book, you finally understand. That was always definitely very frustrating. So that looks like I feel like that's all the questions that people have asked. If anybody has any more questions, like now's the time to ask. Oh, here's a new one. How do you create clues for your character to solve? So to expand on that, do you start at the end and go backwards, or do you kind of create the mystery as your characters are solving it?
I think like I really like before I start any of the major writing, I kind of create a map of just, bullet points of like, okay, this has to happen, this has to happen. But yeah, I definitely know the ending before I start filling in that middle section, which is by far always the hardest part of the book, I think.
So the middle part you find hardest?
Oh yeah, it's like, I don't know what happens in the middle. Who cares? Let's just get to it. Yeah. So trying to keep that compelling.
I find endings the hardest personally, like knowing how I want these characters to end up. I find that really hard. So that's interesting that you find the middle harder.
Yeah, I'm a little bit with Searra as well. Like, I think I need to kind of know what the ending's going to be before I almost even really dig in, just to like, okay, I know I'm working towards this thing. And then as long as I have that, then I feel like a little bit more confident. But if I don't, then it's not just a whole mess the whole way through. Because I'm like, I don't know where this is going. What am I doing? But yeah, having the end, then I'm at least like, okay, now maybe I can like work back a bit to be like, well, I want to make sure like, these little bits and bobs kind of go in. Or if it's a mystery like this, with mine, it was kind of trying to be like, well, I do want to have some little subtle clues or things in it. So how do I put them or where? And so it was kind of a bit of a building a map as well, just to make sure I kind of fit them in and stuff. But definitely kind of back and forth and all over the place for me.
Yeah, I love connecting the dots like that. And it's almost like we're playing detective ourselves. But instead of finding clues, we're making them up, but we still have to have the clues that are going to prove the guilt of the guilty party by the end. And so it really is fascinating. It's writing detectives. I think writing detective stories is even more fun than reading them. I really enjoy it. It's such a great puzzle. It's a ball. I'm having a great time doing it. And it really is. It's a puzzle and connecting the dots and the planting a clue and having your character miss it, but knowing the reader is going to pick up on it. That's always fun. And putting out some kind of clever rhyming riddle. I have a lot of those in this book. There's a lot of like clever little rhyming riddles. I loved that stuff when I was a kid. I absolutely went nuts for it. And so I just try to pack it in there. Even it may be too many clues. It may be obvious by the end, but they were fun. They were fun to make.
Okay, so I think we're going to do one more question before closing remarks. Do you have any recommendations for other great kids mysteries that either maybe inspired you or contemporary ones that you find are really fun that people who like your work might also want to check out?
I'm not too sure. I would say check out Tom and Sierra's work.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of another mystery. Like I really enjoyed diving into just the other like young graphic novel readers, but I'm trying to think of a mystery one. But just like you kind of mentioned earlier, how it's become a new kind of medium is this kind of in between age, where before it was always like picture books and then graphic novels once you're older and then read them, where now there's so many in between. So I've been trying to kind of devour a lot of that. But as far as other mystery ones, I don't know.
I'm trying to decide if I should jump from my bookshelf to grab it.
I know, I was just like
Jump for
thinking
it?
about what's
Yeah.
behind
I'll
you.
jump for it.
What do I have?
While you
that I can
answer.
share?
See what Tom comes back with.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, like I love like Emily Carroll and like stuff like that, but that's definitely older.
Yeah, that's a little more teen.
Yeah, but I mean, as a kid and stuff, you definitely read like older, right? Like,
Yeah,
so,
that's true.
I don't know. Oh, don't read stuff like that.
What'd you find?
So this is one of my favorite stories. It's a science fiction story by a Polish science fiction author named Stanislaw Lem. A couple of years ago, well, actually quite a while ago, because he put a lot of work in it, John Muth made a graphic novel out of it. And it's it's both beautiful and amazingly done. It's called The Seventh Voyage, and it's a mystery in space. But the crazy thing is there's only one character, and yet there's still a mystery. It's absolutely fantastic. The artwork
sounds great.
is beautiful. Let me just show you the whole thing. I don't know how he ever got it done. He worked on it for like 20 years. The whole thing is watercolor paintings.
Oh, beautiful.
It's absolutely amazing. Highly recommended. Great science fiction, great mystery, and just an all-around great graphic novel.
All right, Seventh Voyage. Great. So yeah, I guess if you have any closing remarks, where can we get your books? If people were new to your work today, where can they find your stuff? Is it on the TCAF shop?
Yeah, I think my Mason Moony Paranormal Investigator should be on all the TCAF stuff and Flying Eye. So yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, and hopefully mine is. But if you're at your local bookstore or wherever you buy your book, if you want to check out Simon & Chester, then please do, and let me know if you like it. Hopefully find it funny.
Yeah, so mine are The Sewer Rat Stink and Slime for Dinner. Those are my Geronimo Stiltons. And then I have a graphic novel that I wrote but did not illustrate because they got a good artist to do it. That's coming out this summer, and it is it's Disney's Doorway to Danger, starring Donald Duck and Mickey and Uncle Scrooge and Minnie and Daisy and everybody else you can think of, and all the crazy clues we could possibly cram into that book.
Very exciting. That's great. Yeah, so I think that about wraps everything up. I think there we go. Yeah.
Thank you all so much for joining us, Cale Atkinson, Searra Miller, Tom Angleberger, and Joey Matthews. This panel definitely made me feel nostalgic around the mystery references from my own childhood. We had a little bit of X-Files chats, and then Captain Underpants here, and then Itchy and Scratchy from The Simpsons. It's a huge throwback. I myself grew up on Eric Wilson mystery novels. Usually they were set in Canada, so it's super exciting to just be like, oh my God, this happened in Toronto. I feel so cool. 10-year-old me. We definitely need to do more of these panels. Thank you so much for joining us. And thank you for joining us at TCAF 2021 and continuing the adventure for those who love a good case to crack. Make sure to check out Cale Atkinson's Simon & Chester Super Detectives, available for pre-order. Yeah. And Searra Miller's Mason Moony Doppleganger Detective, coming soon.
Yeah.
And Tom Angleberger's Geronimo Stilton, Slime for Dinner, which dropped this February of 2021. And just announced Disney's Doorway to Danger. Is that correct?
That's
awesome.
right.
Sick. Thank you all attendees for tuning in. TCAF is brought to you in part by Seneca College School of Creative Arts and Animation. And a special thanks to the Beguiling Books and Art, Page and Panel, the TCAF shop, with government support from Canada Council for the Arts, Ontario Art Council, and Toronto Art Council. So to crack the next case, is there another fun event like this one that I can tune into? It's elementary. So check out the YouTube premiere of Seeing Sounds tonight at 6 p.m. on our Toronto Comics channel. Seeing Sounds is a collaboration between TCAF and Loop Sessions Toronto. It's a live drawing event featuring a roster of 3 illustrators, Freddie Carrasco, Frizzkid, and Jima Gariba, performing a live drawing session. The illustrators will be complemented with a roster of 3 beat makers, Chima, Reason, and Sick Knowledge from Loop Sessions Toronto, to provide a live soundtrack for an evening hour of creativity and great vibes, co-hosted by myself and VJ Smith of Loop Sessions Toronto. Also, check out our online marketplace to get your hands on all the wonderful comics and art from our amazing lineup of creators. Looking for your favorite artists? We have a pretty rad list of exhibitors to navigate on our website. Thanks, everyone, and happy TCAF!